Elena Winters stepped between armed men and their target during a violent shooting in a diner parking lot, shielding a stranger with her own body. 24 hours later, Dante Ferraro, the most powerful Mafia boss in Los Angeles, sent 20 armed men to her apartment door. The winter night was clear and freezing, the stars sharp as diamonds above the city, frost coating every surface like crystallized breath. The parking lot behind Gino's diner was empty except for the delivery van and the 3 men in black leather jackets who had cornered the driver against the cold metal bumper. One of them had a gun. The other 2 blocked the only exit. The driver was 17, trembling, his name tag still pinned to his chest, Marcus, his hands raised, his voice barely a whisper, "Please, I don't have anything valuable. Please." The man with the gun stepped forward, his finger tightening on the trigger, the frost crackling under his boots with each measured step. Then Elena pushed through the diner's back door, still wearing her stained apron, her orthopedic shoes worn through at the heel. She had heard the commotion. She had heard the fear in Marcus's voice, the same fear she heard in her own daughter's nightmares. She ran toward them. "Stop," she said. Her voice was not loud, but something in it cut through the winter air like a blade. "Stop right now." The men turned to her. The one with the gun laughed, a sound like gravel being crushed. "Get back inside, old woman." Elena was 34 but looked older. Years of double shifts and sleepless nights had mapped themselves across her face. But her eyes were clear, and they were not afraid. "He is a child," Elena said. She moved between the gun and Marcus, spreading her arms wide. "You want something of value? Take me." "But you will not take him." The driver whimpered behind her. She could feel his trembling against her back. She could smell the cold sweat on his skin, the sharp tang of his terror mixing with the metallic smell of gunpowder that hung in the frozen air. "You have no idea what you are doing," the gunman said. "No," Elena replied, her voice steady as stone. "But I know that whatever you want, it is not worth killing a child. So you will lower that gun, and you will leave." 50 feet away, in the darkness behind tinted windows of a black Mercedes, Dante Ferraro watched. His lieutenant Vinny sat beside him, whispering urgently, "Sir, we should move. They could turn on us any second." Dante raised one hand for silence. His eyes, dark gray, like storm clouds gathering, never left Elena's face. He had seen 15 years of men in this city. He had seen them grovel and beg. He had seen them betray their own brothers for money. He had seen cruelty dressed in expensive suits and mercy dressed in rags. But he had never seen a woman with coffee stains on her apron stand between a gun and a stranger's life. The gunman lowered his weapon. His 2 companions exchanged a glance, something uncertain passing between them. Within 30 seconds, they were backing away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the diner's parking lot, their footsteps fading until there was only the sound of the freezing wind and Elena's own breathing, ragged and desperate. She helped Marcus to his feet. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" The boy shook his head, tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. "Go inside," Elena told him gently. "Tell Angelo to give you hot coffee. Tell him it is on my tab." Then she straightened her apron, the same apron she had been wearing for 7 hours, and walked back through the diner's door as if she had not just risked her life for someone she had never met. In the Mercedes, Dante Ferraro turned to his lieutenant. His jaw was clenched. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Who is she?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "A waitress," Vinny replied carefully. "Works double shifts at that diner. Nobody important." Dante's eyes returned to the diner's glowing windows. He watched Elena move behind the counter, pouring coffee with the same steady hands that had just faced down a gun. "Nobody important," he repeated, but he was not speaking to Vinny anymore. He was speaking to himself. What he did not know in that moment, what no one in that parking lot could have predicted, was that this single act of reckless courage had made Elena Winters visible to a man for whom invisibility meant safety, and visibility meant everything would change. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back in time, 48 hours earlier, to understand how a single mother working double shifts in one of Los Angeles' oldest diners had come to be so broken and so brave. The apartment was so cold you could see Elena's breath misting in front of her face. She sat on the worn carpet of her bedroom, the only room with a door that closed, and counted the bills in her wallet one more time, even though she had already counted them that morning, and the morning before that. $40. $7 in quarters scattered across the dresser from tips that Derek Collins had not stolen from her apron pocket. $47 total. She had 7 days left before her rent was due. 7 days to find $200 that did not exist anywhere in her life except in the mathematical space between desperation and impossible. In the next room, she could hear her daughter Ava, 5 years old, with Elena's dark eyes and her father's dimpled smile, playing quietly with a doll that had been donated from a church charity 3 months ago. The doll's left arm was held on with string. One of its eyes no longer opened. But Ava loved the doll with the intensity of a child who had learned early that nothing beautiful lasts. Elena folded the bills carefully and placed them back in her wallet. Then she pulled out the red envelope that had arrived 3 days ago. The eviction notice. 12 days remaining. The words printed in bold across the top, notice to vacate premises. Below that, in numerals that made her stomach turn, $2,847.53 owed in past due rent. The address of her apartment, the address of her shame, the address of the only place her daughter had ever lived. She had not told Ava yet. She did not know how to tell a 5-year-old that the walls that held her drawings and the closet that held her clothes and the bed where Elena read her bedtime stories might not be theirs much longer. The phone rang. Elena flinched. She stood up slowly and walked into the small kitchen, where a single light bulb cast everything in yellow shadow. "Is this Mrs. Elena Winters?" The voice was clinical, professional, the kind of voice that delivered bad news as a matter of routine. "Yes," Elena said. "This is St. Mary's Hospital. We are calling regarding your mother's account. She was admitted to our facility on November 14th with a severe stroke. The preliminary treatment came to $47,000. We understand that you are listed as her emergency contact and her financial responsible party. We need to discuss a payment plan." Elena sat down on the kitchen chair. The plastic seat cracked slightly under her weight. Through the wall, she could still hear Ava singing softly to her damaged doll, a song Elena had taught her, a song about flowers that grew in winter. "How much?" Elena heard herself ask. $47,000 for the initial treatment. Ongoing care will be approximately $3,000 per month. For rehabilitation, you should anticipate an additional $8,000 to $10,000. Elena hung up the phone. Not dramatically, not in anger, but gently, as if she were hanging up a coat that was no longer hers to wear. She sat in the darkness of the kitchen. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere between her daughter's birth and her mother's stroke, somewhere in the geography of too many shifts and too many men like Derek Collins and too many notices and not enough time. She had $200 left in the world. Not $200 per week. Not per month. Total. $200 in her name, in her bank account, in her possession, in her life. Gino's diner opened at 5 in the morning. Elena would be there by 4:30. She would tie on her apron, the same one with the coffee stains and the burn marks from a pot of boiling water that had tipped 6 months ago, leaving a scar on her left hand shaped like a crescent moon. She would clock in, even though Gino had not given her a raise in 3 years. Even though her shift was supposed to end at 2 in the afternoon, but Derek Collins always found extra tables for her to work, extra hours that he never paid for, hours he called training and character buildings and commitment to the restaurant. She would serve coffee to men in suits who would not look at her face. She would wipe down tables where families sat together, intact families with children who had 2 parents and homes that would not be ripped away in 12 days. She would smile when her feet were screaming inside orthopedic shoes that had been orthopedic for so long they no longer held her properly. And she would count the hours until she could come home to Ava, until she could lie beside her daughter in the darkness and pretend that everything would be all right. The wind picked up outside. It rattled the thin windows of the apartment, and the sound was like fingers tapping, like someone trying to get in, like the cold itself was alive and hungry and looking for a way inside. Elena stood up. She returned to her daughter's room and lay down beside Ava on the narrow bed. The doll with the broken arm was wedged between them. Ava was already asleep, her breathing soft and even, her face peaceful in a way that Elena's face had not been peaceful in years. Outside, the Los Angeles night was clear and freezing. The stars were sharp as diamonds, too bright, too distant, too indifferent to the woman and child sleeping in the cold apartment, 3 miles away from a diner where a delivery driver would soon begin his shift, 3 miles away from the moment that would change everything, 3 miles and 24 hours away from the night that a man in a black Mercedes would watch her risk her life for a stranger. But that was still tomorrow. Tonight, Elena Winters slept beside her daughter and counted the hours that remained. The fluorescent lights hummed their broken song above the Chrome Spoon Diner, a sound like insects trapped in glass, a sound that had become the soundtrack to Elena Winters' life. 6 in the morning, and the place was already half full with the kind of people who worked nights or could not sleep, construction workers with dust still in their hair, insomniacs nursing black coffee, a man in a wrinkled suit reading yesterday's news. Elena moved between the tables with her tray balanced against her hip, her orthopedic shoes making soft squeaking sounds against the checkered linoleum floor that had never been truly clean, not in the 3 years she had worked here. She was 28 years old but looked 45. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it made her temples ache. Her eyes were the color of winter water, and in those eyes lived a kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. The apron she wore had been white once. Now it was a map of stains, coffee here, grease there, something dark that might have been tomato sauce or might have been something she did not want to think about. On her left wrist, red marks were fading to purple, shaped like fingers. The morning shift ended at 2 in the afternoon. Elena moved to the corner booth and sat down hard on the cracked vinyl seat. Her feet throbbed inside the orthopedic shoes, a pain that started at her heels and climbed all the way into her lower back. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the tips she had collected over the course of 8 hours. 1s and 5s, mostly. A few crumpled 20s. She had learned to count money the way other people count breaths, automatically, without thinking, the way her body had learned to function on almost no food and almost no hope. $43. She wrote it down on the back of a receipt on the table, her handwriting shaky. $43 meant she could buy milk for Ava's cereal tomorrow. It meant she could pay half of the electric bill before the company cut the power. It meant that if she was very careful, she might have enough for Ava's inhaler refill when it ran out in 5 days. Her daughter had been in the hospital 3 weeks ago. The bills from that stay were still arriving in envelopes with red letters stamped across them. $200,000. That number had stopped making sense to Elena after the first day. It was a number too large to mean anything real. It was like trying to imagine the distance to a star. She had $200 in her pocket. All of it. The door to the back opened. Derek Collins came out, moving through the diner the way he moved through everything in his life, like he owned it, like he had a right to all of it. He was 42 years old with slicked-back dark hair and the kind of soft gut that came from drinking beer every night and never moving his body except to reach for another glass. His manager's vest had a coffee stain that matched the ones on Elena's apron, except Derek did not spend 20 minutes trying to scrub it out because Derek did not care what he looked like or what impression he made. Derek had already decided that he was important, and nothing would convince him otherwise. He moved directly to the corner booth where Elena sat today. He did not ask permission. He sat down across from her and reached for her tip jar, a glass jar that she kept on the counter, the one place where customers could leave their money, the one place that was supposed to be hers. He took 3 20s from the jar. He did not count them. He did not apologize. He simply took them and put them in the pocket of his vest, and the sound of the bills sliding into his pocket was like the sound of a door closing. Elena's hands became fists. Derek. Those are mine. I earned those. You earn what I decide you earn. His voice was the voice of a man who had said this kind of thing so many times that it no longer registered as cruelty. It registered as fact, like gravity, like death, like the way the sun rises whether or not anyone is there to see it. You work for me. That means you pay your dues. That's not, Elena started, but Derek was already standing. He moved around the table and grabbed her wrist, the one with the 4 red marks that were already fading to purple. He grabbed it hard enough that the marks turned red again, bright red, fresh red. You want to keep working here, you keep your mouth shut, he said. His breath smelled like cigarettes and the eggs he had eaten for breakfast. You report me to corporate or the cops or anyone else, you are finished in this city. I know the managers at every restaurant from here to Santa Monica. One phone call and you are blacklisted. Do you understand me? Elena nodded. She nodded because she had learned that nodding was sometimes the only power she had left. Derek released her wrist and walked away, his footsteps heavy on the linoleum. Double shift tonight, he called back. No overtime pay or you are done. Your choice. Elena sat very still. She looked down at her wrist. The marks from his fingers were already swelling, already turning colors that nature never intended skin to be. She put her hand over the marks, as if she could hide them from herself, as if covering them made them disappear. The fluorescent lights continued their broken humming. The man in the wrinkled suit continued reading yesterday's news. The world continued turning. And Elena Winters continued existing in the spaces between survival and surrender. The apartment where Elena lived was in Boyle Heights, 3 miles east of the Chrome Spoon Diner. It was a building from another era, painted a color that had once been called avocado green but had faded over decades into something closer to the color of disease. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and someone else's cigarettes. The stairs creaked in places that felt personal, like the building was complaining specifically to Elena about her presence. She climbed to the 3rd floor. Her legs moved automatically. Her mind was already in the apartment, already reaching for Ava, already preparing the small lie she would tell, that everything was fine, that the money would work out, that her mother was not terrified. But before she could reach the door to her apartment, she saw it. An envelope was taped to the door. White envelope, official letters, a red stamp across the front that said final notice. Elena's heart did something that hearts should not do. It skipped and stuttered and then beat twice as fast to make up for the lost time. She pulled the envelope free. Her hands were shaking in a way she could not control. Inside was a 12-day eviction notice. 12 days. In 12 days, she and Ava would have no place to live. In 12 days, they would join the thousands of people on Los Angeles streets who slept in cars or tents or under the overpasses where the sound of traffic was constant and hypnotic and the smell was like nothing could ever be clean again. Elena sat down on the hallway floor, right there outside the apartment, and for a moment she allowed herself to not be strong. For a moment, her shoulders collapsed. For a moment, she sat with her face in her hands and felt the weight of all of it, the medical bills, the job that was stealing from her, the man who had grabbed her wrist, the apartment she could not afford, the daughter inside who needed her to have answers. But moments passed. They always did. She stood up. She went inside. Ava was asleep on the mattress that took up most of the bedroom. The mattress was on the floor because they could not afford a bed frame. Her daughter was 6 years old and small for her age, the way children became small when they did not get enough calories, when they lived with constant low-level stress, when their bodies learned early that taking up space was a luxury. An inhaler sat on a folded towel next to the pillow. A doll with a broken arm lay against Ava's chest. Elena did the math. She sat at the kitchen table, which was a folding card table they had gotten from a donation center, and she pulled out every receipt and bill she could find. She wrote on the back of an old grocery store receipt. Rent, already paid for this month, but the notice said she needed to pay 1 month's deposit to stay even one more day. $1,500 for the deposit. Eviction filing fee, $300. Medical bills, $200,000. Ava's medications and asthma treatments, $500 per month. Food, $200 per month if she was careful. Gas and electric, $200 per month. Car payment, $300 per month. She had $200. The numbers would not add up no matter how many times she calculated them. $200 was like a single drop of water poured into the ocean. It was like trying to stop the tide with her bare hands. Elena went to work for the double shift. 10 hours at the diner with her feet bleeding inside her orthopedic shoes and Derek's handprints bruising darker on her wrist and the knowledge that in 12 days everything would be gone. She served coffee to people who did not see her. She cleared plates of food that was more calories than she had eaten in 2 days. She smiled when her stomach was hollow and her heart was breaking and the fluorescent lights above her head continued their broken humming like the sound of a countdown she could not stop. At 3 o'clock in the morning, during her break, Elena stood in the parking lot of the Chrome Spoon Diner. The air was cold and sharp. The wind was picking up. 3 miles away, a delivery driver would begin his shift. 3 miles away, black Mercedes would be waiting in the darkness. 3 miles away, a man would be watching from the shadows, a man whose name was Dante Ferraro, a man who would change everything that was about to happen with a single decision, a single moment of witnessing courage where courage had no reason to exist. But Elena did not know any of that yet. She only knew the cold. She only knew the wind. She only knew that in 12 days, her world was ending, and she had no power to stop it. The morning light filtered through the cracked window of Elena's apartment like something fractured and barely alive. She woke at 5:30 to the sound of Ava's breathing, that slight wheeze in the child's chest that meant another inhaler treatment before school. $200. That was all that remained in her checking account. $200 to cover rent, electricity, gas, the medication that kept her daughter alive. The math had never worked and it would not work today. Elena sat on the edge of the mattress they shared and counted the bills twice. Then 3 times. The numbers did not change. She pulled the eviction notice from under the pillow where she had hidden it from Ava's eyes. 12 days. Red ink screaming across the white paper. 12 days before the lock changed and they had nowhere to go. She dressed in her waitress uniform, the polyester stretched thin at the seams, and braided her dark hair back from a face that looked older than 28. The mirror showed her what exhaustion looked like when it had a body. She woke Ava at 6, gave her the nebulizer treatment while the child watched cartoons on a phone with a cracked screen, packed a lunch of bread and peanut butter, and drove her to school in a car that knocked every time she accelerated. At the Chrome Spoon Diner, the fluorescent lights hummed their broken song. Elena tied her apron and began the morning shift at 7. Derek Collins emerged from the back office at 7:30, his manager's name tag catching the light. He was 46 with the kind of face that had learned cruelty young and had not forgotten it since. When he passed her station, his hand brushed her lower back. She moved away. He smiled like she had confirmed something he already knew. That afternoon, while Elena cleared a table near the window, she noticed a black Mercedes idling in the parking lot. Tinted windows. Engine running. She had never seen it before and now it seemed to appear every time she took her break. A man sat in the driver's seat visible for only a moment before the window rose. Dark eyes. Sharp features. A scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone like a line drawn by something ancient and angry. He watched her. Then he was gone. At 3 in the morning, Elena stood in the frozen parking lot during her break. The air cut like blades wrapped in ice. The wind carried the smell of diesel and distant rain. Somewhere in the dark beyond the diner's yellow light, boxes shifted in a delivery van. A young man, maybe 19, was loading them, his breath visible in white clouds. He wore a company uniform and the desperate expression of someone working a night shift to survive. 3 shadows emerged from the alley. They moved with the synchronized precision of men who had done this before. Black leather jackets. Guns drawn. One of them, the lead, stepped forward and his voice was flat and without mercy. "You were told to deliver to the east side. Not here. You cost us money. 20 grand. The driver stammered. His hands shot toward the sky. He said he was sorry. He said he had made a mistake. He said anything he could think of because he could see the guns and he could see the eyes of the men holding them. Elena dropped the 2 bags of leftover food the cook had given her. She walked forward. Her orthopedic shoes crunched on the frost coating the parking lot asphalt like shattered glass. The sound seemed impossibly loud. She positioned herself directly between the guns and the boy. "Leave him alone." Her voice shook but her body was still. "He is nobody. Just a kid trying to work. You want to shoot someone, shoot me. But let him go." The 3 men stared at her as if she had begun speaking in a language that belonged to animals or ghosts. The lead man lowered his weapon slightly. "Who the hell are you?" She did not answer. She simply spread her arms wider and stood there, trembling like a candle in the wind but refusing to bend. Inside the black Mercedes parked in the shadows beyond the diner's light, a man sat in the back seat. His name was Dante Ferraro. He was 6'2" with the kind of shoulders that had carried weight most people would collapse under. Expensive suit. White shirt open at the collar revealing the kind of chest that belonged to a man who had fought his entire life and won. His dark hair silvered slightly at the temples. The scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone seemed to deepen when he looked at anything beautiful or broken or both at once. Beside him, Vinny shifted in his seat. "Sir, should we intervene?" Dante raised one hand. Silence. He watched the woman in the stained apron standing between 3 armed men and their target. He watched her choose a stranger over her own survival. For 15 years, he had seen nothing surprise him. But his chest had tightened in a way he had forgotten was possible. The gunman hesitated. Their leader sheathed his weapon. "You are insane, lady. Get out of here." They dissolved back into the darkness from which they had emerged. Elena helped the driver to his feet. He stammered his gratitude. She waved it away and walked toward the bus stop at the corner. Dante watched until she disappeared. Then he turned to Vinny with an expression that had altered something fundamental between them. "Find out everything about her." "Everything." Vinny was already pulling out his phone, his fingers moving across the screen. He knew better than to ask questions. When Dante Ferraro wanted to know something, the knowing became inevitable. 24 hours later, Elena walked into the Chrome Spoon diner and everything had changed. Her left eye was swollen completely shut, purple and black spreading across her face like spilled ink. Handprint bruises mapped her throat in vivid detail, 5 fingers and a thumb pressed so deep the flesh had darkened to the color of storm clouds. Her bottom lip was split and bleeding. She had applied makeup but it only made the damage more visible, a thin veneer over catastrophe. The morning cook gasped. Derek emerged from the back office without asking what happened because Derek already knew. He had done it. 6 hours after Elena had mentioned calling the police, after she had felt a moment of courage born from that strange protection she did not understand, Derek had waited outside her apartment building. He had pushed her against the brick wall and wrapped his hand around her throat and squeezed. "You say one word to anyone and I will make sure you never work again. I will make sure your daughter ends up in foster care. You are nothing. You are less than nothing." She had clawed at his hand. She had seen stars. She had felt the world narrowing to nothing but the pressure of his grip and the certainty that this was how it ended. He had released her and disappeared into the night. Now she tied her apron and began her shift because she could not afford to miss a single day. Could not afford to lose this job no matter how cruel the hands that managed it. Could not afford anything except to continue breathing and working and surviving. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, Vinny sat across from Dante and slid a folder across the desk. His voice was steady and factual. Elena Winters, age 28. Single mother. Daughter Ava, age 6. Chronic asthma. Medical debt $200,000 from ICU stay 3 weeks ago. Eviction notice, 12 days remaining. Works double shifts at Chrome Spoon Diner. Manager Derek Collins has 3 harassment complaints filed and buried by his connections. Elena has $200 in her checking account. That is all she has in the world. Dante read in silence. His jaw tightened. When he looked up, his eyes had gone darker. "The manager," he said. His voice was quiet. Lethal. Like a blade wrapped in silk. Vinny nodded. "Derek Collins. Steals tips. Forces overtime. Threatens the women." Dante stood and walked to the window. The city spread below him like something he owned, which he did. Send 20 men to her home tonight. Not as a threat. As protection. She should not be alone. And find out where Derek Collins lives. Find out everything about him. I want to know what he eats for breakfast. I want to know the names of his relatives. I want to know every breath he has taken since the moment he was born. That evening, Elena climbed the stairs to her apartment and froze on the landing. 20 men in black suits lined the hallway, positioned at intervals like dark statues. They were armed. They were silent. They were waiting. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She could not breathe. The lead man stepped forward. His hands were raised, palms visible, peaceful. "Miss Winters. We are here for your protection. No one will touch you or your daughter. You are safe now." She backed against her door. "I do not understand. Who sent you?" He did not answer. He only nodded toward the window, and she understood that whoever had sent them had already accounted for the fact that she would be afraid. She pulled Ava inside and locked the door. That night, while her daughter slept, Elena stood in the darkness and watched 20 armed men guard her apartment. She did not sleep. She did not cry. She just sat there wondering what debt she had incurred simply by choosing to stand between a gun and a stranger. Outside, Nino and the other men remained perfectly still, their eyes moving constantly, their hands ready. And in the penthouse across the city, Dante Ferraro sat in the darkness and thought about a woman in a stained apron who had given everything she did not have. Meanwhile, in a cream-colored office on Wilshire Boulevard, Margaret Harrington received a phone call from Derek Collins. Her voice when she spoke was sharp as broken glass. "That girl who works for you. The one with the bruises now. I want her gone. Use whatever means necessary. She has become a problem." Derek's laugh carried the sound of a man who had never known mercy and had never bothered to search for it. "Already in motion," he said. But what neither of them understood was that Dante Ferraro had already moved first, and the pieces they were moving would collide with forces far beyond their comprehension. The machinery had begun. And there was no stopping it now. The freezer door swung shut with a metallic slam that echoed like a coffin closing. Elena's breath came in white clouds, immediate and terrifying in the sudden cold. Derek's voice, muffled through the metal, carried the weight of a man who had finally stopped pretending to be civilized. "You think your Mafia boyfriend scares me? Margaret Harrington owns this place and she wants you gone. You are fired. You are blacklisted. You are nothing." His footsteps retreated. A lock clicked into place from the outside. The walk-in freezer stretched 12 feet long, lined with steel shelves holding sides of beef and boxes of frozen vegetables. The temperature hovered at -5 degrees. Elena's apron, still damp with spilled coffee from the dinner rush, began to stiffen against her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself and pounded on the door. Her knuckles struck the metal in rapid succession, a rhythm of desperation that absorbed into the cold without echo. Her voice cracked. "Help! Someone help!" No one came. Time became strange in that freezer. She could not tell if it was 5 minutes or 20. Her fingers went numb first, then her toes. She stopped pounding and instead sat on the concrete floor, her back against the cold wall, her breath shallow to preserve warmth. She thought of Ava at home with the neighbor, Ava who was afraid of the dark and who needed her mother to check for monsters under the bed before sleep came. She thought of how she had failed to protect herself and therefore failed to protect her daughter from this. The freezer burned. Not with heat but with cold that felt like punishment, like the world pressing down on her shoulders in crystalline fury. 20 minutes. That was how long Marcus the line cook had to wonder why Elena had not returned with the frozen chicken before he went looking for her. He found her on the freezer floor, shaking so violently her teeth chattered in sequences she could not control. He unlocked the door and wrapped her in his jacket, and her first words were not about herself. "Where is my shift? I need this paycheck." But Marcus had already decided. He was calling her a cab. She was going home. That evening, as Elena sat on her worn couch with Ava drawing pictures beside her, a knock came at the door. That was not the sound of knuckles but the sound of authority. Through the peephole, Elena saw a woman in a cream-colored blazer, her blonde hair styled with precision, her face arranged into an expression of contempt. Behind her stood a man in a dark suit carrying a leather folder. Margaret Harrington stepped into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum like a countdown. She surveyed the space, the mismatched furniture, the water stain on the ceiling, the toys scattered across the floor, with the expression of someone examining a disease. Her voice was venom distilled into human form. "I know who is protecting you, Miss Winters. But money and violence do not change what you are. You are trash. You will always be trash. And when he gets bored of you, you will have nothing." She placed an eviction notice on the table. The red ink on the date seemed to pulse in the fluorescent light. 30 days, she said. "My lawyer will handle the rest." Ava, 4 years old and sensing danger the way children do, crawled into Elena's lap and asked in her small voice, "Mommy, why is that lady mean?" Elena held her daughter and felt the architecture of her life collapse inward. That night, after Ava slept, Elena climbed the metal stairs to the apartment building's roof. The winter sky stretched above her, clear and empty, studded with stars so sharp they looked capable of drawing blood. The city glittered below, 10 million lights burning in the darkness, each one representing a person with more than $200 to their name. Each one representing someone who was not her. She had exactly $200 in her pocket. Everything else had been used to keep breathing, to keep Ava breathing, to keep the lights on for 7 more days until the next paycheck that now would never come. The edge of the roof was a low wall, 3 steps away. The wind carried no mercy. She took 1 step. Then another. Her hand gripped the concrete ledge, the frost burning her palm. The city below seemed to be waiting for her to finally disappear, to become one less nobody consuming resources. Then she heard it. Through the open window of the apartment below, the soft mechanical hiss of Ava's inhaler. That tiny sound of her daughter's breath, steady and necessary, the proof that someone on this earth depended on her existence. Elena stepped back from the edge and sank to her knees on the cold concrete. Her body shook with sobs that came from somewhere deeper than grief, from a place where love and terror lived in the same cell. But what was happening in that moment, while Elena knelt on that rooftop contemplating the mathematics of her own invisibility, was that Dante was making decisions that would reshape the entire architecture of her world. The underground poker room existed 3 floors beneath a legitimate nightclub in downtown Los Angeles, accessible only through a private elevator concealed behind a wall of mirrored glass. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the sound of cards being shuffled with mechanical precision. Dante sat at the head of the table, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate, his expression carved from stone. Vinny and Nino flanked him, their bodies' language reflecting decades of loyalty that needed no words. Dante's voice came like ice breaking. "I want everything. Every text message Derek Collins sent to Margaret Harrington. Every bank record showing bribes. Every property purchased with stolen wages. Every piece of evidence documenting 6 years of systematic theft and intimidation. I want it compiled and ready for broadcast by 9 o'clock tonight." Vinny nodded, his jaw tight. "We have it all, sir. Every transaction logged. Every communication documented. The evidence is overwhelming." Dante's dark eyes, the color of a storm at midnight, fixed on nothing and everything simultaneously. "Then release it. Everywhere. News stations. Social media. Make it unavoidable." At exactly 8:53 p.m., 12 men in black tactical gear moved through the kitchen entrance of the Chrome Spoon Diner like ghosts materializing from shadow. The evening shift continued, oblivious, until the back office door exploded inward. Derek Collins sat at his desk counting stolen tips, $340 spread before him like a prayer to his own greed. His head snapped up as the men entered. His face went white, not the white of fear but the white of a man watching his infrastructure collapse in real time. The footsteps of the men sounded like destiny arriving. Nino stood in the doorway, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "Derek Collins, you are done." Derek's response came as a high-pitched whimper. "Please. Please, I will pay it back. I will leave the city. I will do anything. Please." The men handcuffed him without roughness and without mercy, which was somehow worse. Outside, news vans were already positioning, their cameras pointed at the diner entrance. Anonymous tips had been sent to every media outlet in Los Angeles with timestamps and evidence links. By the time Derek was being led to the police car, the first reporter was already thrusting a microphone toward his tear-streaked face. "Is it true you have been stealing from employees for 6 years, Mr. Collins? Is it true there were 12 formal complaints of sexual harassment?" Simultaneously, across the city at the Beverly Hilton, Margaret Harrington stood in a ballroom filled with Los Angeles' elite, a crystal champagne flute in her manicured hand, smiling for photographers with the confidence of a woman who believed herself untouchable. The massive screens that had been displaying a slideshow of charity gala moments flickered and then switched to breaking news. Breaking news, the text read in bold white letters. Prominent businesswoman Margaret Harrington under federal investigation for fraud, wage theft, and racketeering. Evidence obtained shows systematic theft from employees across 5 properties totaling over $2 million. FBI raid imminent. The ballroom went silent. Not the silence of politeness but the silence of predators recognizing a threat they cannot outrun. Margaret's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble floor. The sound of breaking crystal seemed to break something in her as well. She turned and saw them, FBI agents in dark windbreakers moving through the crowd with the efficiency of men carrying out warrants that had already been signed by judges who had already reviewed the evidence and found it damning. The next morning, Margaret Harrington's mansion in Brentwood was raided at dawn. Helicopters circled overhead broadcasting live aerial footage. Agents carried evidence boxes from her home while news crews filmed every moment. Her assets, $12 million in property, investments, accounts, were frozen by court order. Her business licenses were revoked. Her social circle, that intricate network of wealthy women who had lunched with her and invited her to galas, released carefully worded statements condemning her and removing photographs of themselves with her from their social media accounts. She collapsed on her front lawn in her silk robe, her carefully constructed facade shattered, screaming at the cameras with her voice carrying the sound of a woman whose world had become uninhabitable. "This is a setup. I am innocent. You cannot do this to me. You do not understand who I am." But the evidence that had already gone viral knew exactly who she was. Recordings emerged of her instructing Derek to threaten Elena. Bank records showed stolen wages carefully documented. Bribes to health inspectors were itemized in spreadsheets. Within 1 hour, 500,000 people had seen the footage. By morning, 2 million. By the end of the week, every news outlet in the country had broadcast her face alongside the word criminal. Federal charges were filed against both of them. Derek Collins faced 40 years in federal prison. Margaret Harrington faced 60 years. Their own families abandoned them in real time, their lawyers withdrawing their representation, their reputations annihilated not by a single bullet but by systematic, relentless, public destruction. Dante Ferraro's justice was not death. It was something far more complete. It was making the world see what he saw. It was stripping away their power and leaving them exposed, their cruelty documented, their crimes immortalized in the permanent record that the internet creates. Death would have been too quick, too easy, too merciful. The machinery Dante had set in motion could not be stopped. It could only move forward, grinding everything in its path to dust. The television screen blazed with the face of Derek Collins, his hands in cuffs, federal agents flanking him as he was led from his home in handcuffs. Elena sat on the worn edge of her bed, Ava asleep against her chest, watching the news anchor's voice crack with the weight of what she was reporting. Derek Collins, former restaurant manager, facing 40 years in federal prison. Margaret Harrington, philanthropist and socialite, arrested at her estate. Bank records. Recordings. Bribes. Threats. All of it documented, all of it viral, all of it undeniable. Elena's hands trembled as she watched Margaret Harrington's carefully constructed face crumble on the courthouse steps, cameras swarming like vultures. The woman who had stolen from her staff, who had instructed Derek to threaten Elena into silence, who had written the playbook for cruelty dressed up in designer clothes and charitable galas, that woman was now being led away by federal agents, her empire collapsing in real time. She knew. She knew without being told. She knew the precision of it, the timing, the way every piece of evidence had been preserved and presented, the way it had spread across the internet like a planned operation. Because it was a planned operation. It had been orchestrated by one man, someone she had never met before that winter night in the parking lot. Dante Ferraro. The name sat in her chest like a stone. She did not sleep that night. She lay beside Ava, watching her daughter's small chest rise and fall, and understood that everything she had rebuilt, every dollar she had saved, every moment of safety, all of it had been purchased with someone else's blood and money and ruthless calculation. The next morning, before Ava woke, the black SUV pulled up outside her apartment building in Silver Lake. The same car that had first terrified her, then protected her, then become the vehicle that meant she was safe. Vinny stepped out, and when he knocked on her door, his face was unreadable. "He wants to see you," Vinny said. Not a request. Elena dressed carefully. She put on the navy dress she had bought with her first paycheck from Dante's restaurant, the one that fit her properly, that did not carry the smell of grease and desperation. She left Ava with Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who had become like a grandmother to her daughter, and followed Vinny down to the car. The drive to downtown Los Angeles took 20 minutes. The streets were clear, the morning light sharp and cold. Vinny did not speak. The silence was a weapon, a way of making her understand that what was about to happen mattered more than words. They descended into the underground garage of a building Elena had never noticed before, the kind of place that existed beneath the city, hidden from the sunlight and the eyes of ordinary people. An elevator. A hallway lit by brass sconces. A door that opened into a room with a green felt table and the smell of expensive cigar smoke. Dante Ferraro sat alone at the table, a cigar burning slowly between his fingers. He did not stand when she entered. He simply watched her walk toward him across the carpet, his dark eyes measuring her, waiting. She stopped 3 feet from the table. Her voice, when it came, was steady. Clear. No trembling. "You did this." It was not a question. "I did," he said. His voice was deep, like thunder waiting to strike. "Sit." She sat. "They hurt you," he said. "For months they hurt you, and you said nothing because you were afraid of what would happen to Ava. Margaret Harrington knew about your daughter. She used that knowledge like a weapon. Derek Collins put his hands on you and told you that no one would believe you, that you were nobody, that your complaints would cost you the only income your child had." Elena's jaw tightened. She did not speak. "You have been watched for 6 months, Dante continued, the cigar smoke curling toward the ornate ceiling. "My people documented everything. Every stolen wage. Every threat. Every time Derek's hands left a bruise on your skin. Every time Margaret instructed him to escalate the pressure. We gathered the evidence, and we released it in a way that could not be suppressed, could not be explained away, could not be forgotten." "Why?" Elena's voice cracked on the single word. Dante leaned back in his chair. "Because when I saw you in that parking lot, standing between my nephew and 3 men with guns, I saw something I thought I had killed in myself 15 years ago. Mercy. Courage without motive. You did not save Marco because you wanted something from me. You did not expect payment or gratitude or protection. You saved him because it was right. And I have not seen right and wrong clearly since my brother betrayed me. The words hung in the air between them. You have been protecting me, Elena said. Not a question. Yes. Paying for Ava's medication. The apartment. The job. Yes. Destroying anyone who threatened me. Yes. Elena stood, her hands shaking now, the control she had maintained fracturing at the seams. I did not ask for this. I did not want you to become a murderer on my behalf. I became a murderer long before you, Dante said quietly. You did not make me kill, Elena. You reminded me why I should kill less. You reminded me that power can be used for something other than destruction. She turned and walked to the window that looked out onto the parking garage, at the concrete pillars and the shadows where his men stood guard. What happens now? Now, Dante said, you decide. You can walk away. Disappear. I have the resources to hide you and Ava anywhere in the world. You will never see me again. You will be safe and free and your life will be yours alone. Elena did not turn around. Or, Dante continued, you stay. You rebuild your life, your education, your career. Not because I provide it, but because you earn it. The job I gave you, you can keep it or leave it. The apartment, I will transfer the lease to your name. The money, you can repay it, or you can keep it as payment for reminding me that redemption is possible. But you will do it as an equal, Elena. Not as someone I saved. As someone who saved herself, with space and safety that I provided. Elena closed her eyes. I do not need you to protect me anymore, she said, her voice barely audible. But I choose to stand beside you anyway. When she turned, Dante was standing. For the first time, he smiled. It was not the controlled expression of a man used to hiding his emotions. It was real, unguarded, human. Then let me show you something, he said. He took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, the hand of a man who had held weapons and signed orders and built an empire. He led her up a staircase she had not noticed, through corridors lit by soft light, up and up until they emerged onto a rooftop 30 stories above the city. The winter night spread out beneath them. Stars sharp as diamonds. The city lights below like fallen constellations. The wind carried the smell of rain, of asphalt, of Los Angeles at night. My brother taught me that mercy is weakness, Dante said, his hand still holding hers. You taught me that mercy is strength. That showing mercy is not the same as being powerless. That choosing compassion when you have the power to destroy someone, that is the hardest choice of all. Elena looked at him. Really looked at him. Beneath the expensive suit, beneath the scars and the tattoos and the weight of his choices, she saw the man who had watched her rebuild her life. Who had given her space instead of control. Who had shown her a different way. I do not know how to do this, she whispered. How to stand beside someone like you. You already are, Dante said. He kissed her then, slow and certain, beneath the winter sky, above the city that had broken her and protected her and would never be quite the same after she had moved through it. Inside the penthouse, Vinny and Nino watched from behind the glass doors. Nino whispered something Elena could not hear. Vinny smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, and said quietly, sometimes the people who seem invisible carry the greatest light. 6 months later, Elena stood on a stage at Los Angeles City College in a white nursing school graduation gown, her diploma in her hands, tears streaming down her face. Ava sat in the third row with a homemade sign that read "Proud of you, Mommy" in letters painted in 5 different colors. Beside Ava sat Dante, his hand on her daughter's shoulder, steady and present. Elena had a job offer from Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Night shift in the pediatric ICU. She would help families the way she had always wanted to be helped. Derek Collins was 3 months into his federal sentence at FCI Victorville, and his cellmate was a former employee he once threatened. Justice delivered not by bullets but by systematic consequence. Margaret Harrington was awaiting federal trial, her lawyers abandoning her one by one, her name becoming a punchline in the society pages. The diner where it had all begun was now called the Second Chance Cafe, managed by a woman named Rosa who had also escaped an abusive boss, employed by Dante to hire single mothers and formerly incarcerated workers at fair wages. The chrome was polished. The booths were clean. The tips were protected. Elena and Dante stood in the parking lot where everything had changed, frost on the ground, stars sharp overhead, the exact spot where she had stepped between guns and a stranger's life. "You saved more than my nephew that night," Dante said. "And you saved more than me," Elena answered. Ava ran ahead of them toward the car, laughing, and Vinny held the door open with respect that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognizing the woman who had changed the most powerful man in Los Angeles by refusing to disappear. Sometimes the people who seem invisible carry the greatest light. Elena Winters walked into a winter night with $200 and an eviction notice, and she walked out of it having reminded the world that courage is not about power. It is about choosing what is right when no one is watching, and trusting that someone always is. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because tomorrow we are bringing you another story that will restore your faith in the power of one person's choice to stand between darkness and light. Comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Elena's position? Would you have stepped between those guns? Your story matters. We will see you in the next one.